All right, y'all. Welcome to the show. I'm Scott Horton. And this is my show, the Scott Horton Show. Full archives are available at scotthorton.org. More than 2,500 interviews now going back to 2003. You can also find me on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at /Scott Horton Show. The Scott Horton Show is brought to you by the Future Freedom Foundation at FFF.org. Join the great Jacob Hornberger and some of the best writers in the libertarian movement like James Bovard, Sheldon Richman, Anthony Gregory, Wendy McElroy, and more for a real individualist take on the most important matters of peace, liberty, and prosperity in our society. That's the Future Freedom Foundation at FFF.org. Yeah, it sure is. And I'm very proud that this show is sponsored by FFF in part. And I'm very happy to welcome the founder and president of the Future Freedom Foundation, Jacob Hornberger, back to the show. Welcome back, Jacob. How are you?
Thank you. Great, Scott. Appreciate it, and it's an honor to be here with you.
Well, I'm very happy to have you here. Very happy to have you sponsoring the show. Very appreciative of it as well. And I'm actually really appreciative of this article that you've done on the Iran sanctions at your blog here at fff.org/blog. I remember well that back in the 1990s, you were one of the few people. Well, actually, there was a little bit of an anti-sanctions movement back then, I guess, but you were certainly part of it. Back when most Americans thought of, the 1990s as peacetime, you never let the permanent war against Iraq go, and including the horrible effects of the sanctions on the people there. And now here you are picking up the same cudgels when it comes to the quasi-war against Iran. But before I let you get into that, I wanted to give you a chance first to talk about this great civil liberties tour that you've put together. You've got Bruce Fein and Glenn Greenwald, so one right, one left, and you're the libertarian in the middle, and then you got Jack Hunter is moderating the thing, and you guys are doing a college tour all around the country, the Future Freedom Foundation's Civil Liberties Tour. So please tell us all about it. Sorry, I just sort of stole some of your thunder maybe, but tell us as much as you can about it, and especially places and dates.
Yeah, no, we're really psyched about this program. We consider it quite possibly the most important program we've ever put on, or certainly in the top 5. We started out, part 1 of the tour was over here on the eastern part of the United States. We went to Columbia University in New York last winter, along with Purdue, Indiana universities, Middle Tennessee State University, Ohio State, and now we're taking the tour out west. We're starting with University of Washington at Seattle, University of California, Davis, University of California, San Diego, University of Arizona, Tucson, and then we wrap it up with the University of Colorado at Boulder. It's the week of October 15th through the 19th, Monday through Friday, each evening. It's open to the public. It'll be predominantly students. The co-sponsor is a great outfit called the Young Americans for Liberty. And we're going to be addressing the most important burning issue of our time, and that's the severe violation, effectively the suspension of civil liberties by the federal government post 9/11, where they now have the military now has the authority to take Americans into custody, cart them away to a torture center, concentration camp, military dungeon, hold them forever without a trial, execute them perhaps after a military tribunal, kangaroo in nature. And we're bringing the awareness of why this is so horrific, why it violates everything the founding fathers of this country stood for, to college students and other people who attend these things. And we're going to be live streaming them, and we're going to be archiving the videos on our website at fff.org. So if people are in these areas, we invite you to come over. All the details are on our website at fff.org under the email update. And if not, watch it live streaming or watch it when we put it on there after it's archived. So yeah, we're really psyched about this thing. It's important, it's exciting, and we're trying to move America in a better direction through the power of ideas.
Yeah, well, I don't think you could possibly overstate how important this is. And it's funny because we still have the kind of freedom of speech that allows for you and me to have a conversation about this. It allows for you and Greenwald and Fein to go around speaking at universities. So it almost seems like the things you're talking about must not really be true or must not be that much of a concern, or else why would the government let you be talking about it, right? Isn't it kind of funny that way? They really are claiming the right to just grab, anybody's little brother if they feel like it and do whatever they want with them. But they'll let you criticize them for it, at least for now.
Well, yeah, we got to count our blessings. Let's face it, we do live in a country where they're not rounding up people for what they're saying, and we make severe criticisms of the government. And if you read Glenn Greenwald's blog on The Guardian, he's relentless in the defense of civil liberties and the critique of what the federal government's doing. There's also the assassination of Americans and foreigners. But let's face it, this culture of the First Amendment and free speech is so strong in America, along with freedom of religion and so forth, that the government still isn't doing what authoritarian regimes do when people start pointing out the truth, and that's a blessing that we should be grateful for. But just because we have the freedom to speak out against these injustices and these horrors doesn't mean that they don't exist. And it's incumbent on those of us that still wield this right of freedom of speech and freedom of the press that we continue doing our best to move our country in a better, more just, civil, and free direction. Because you never know when this freedom can be taken away at any particular time. What emergency? We saw that like in World War I and stuff, where they were rounding up people for criticizing the draft and so forth. So you just never know.
Right. Hey, if they can kill you, they can shut you up. They just haven't made that choice yet. So, yeah, it seems like if freedom of speech is, and for that matter, freedom of religion and freedom of people to assemble at their local religious establishments and things like that, if these are the few rights in the Bill of Rights, supposedly protected by the Bill of Rights that we still do have, we better use them, or else we're not even going to have them anymore.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For people to remain silent during this period of time, there's just no excuse for it. You can understand why people might want to remain silent if the government is rounding up people and critics of the government and torturing them and killing them and doing bad things to their family, sort of like, what the U.S.-supported Pinochet regime was doing in Chile. But there's no excuse now. Now is the time when everybody should be fighting hard to move this country back on the right track toward a free society where the Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments are as important as the First and Second and the entire Constitution. Because for so long, those amendments have been treated like just technicalities, especially with this idiotic drug war. And it's time that we had this resurgence of passionate interest and love for those amendments, just as we do for the rest of the amendments in the Constitution.
Right. Okay, now, I really hope, I don't know, but I really do hope that talking about this Civil Liberties tour on this show is going to help a little with attendance anyway. Glenn Greenwald told me once that at virtually every place where he gives a talk, someone comes up and says, hey, I heard you on the Scott Horton show, and that's why I'm a big fan now, or heard you on Anti-War Radio. So, maybe talking about this will get a few more bodies out, maybe many more. If the people listening who want to come will do a little bit of work on their own and bring their own friends and see if they can get some people to bring some more people. And why not turn this into a gigantic standing room only kind of event? We are talking about the most important thing in the whole wide world here.
Well, that's right, and you never know, and even if people don't come, you don't know what the power of ideas are. People say, well, gosh, who's this guy Greenwald? They never heard of him, for example. They say, well, not on your show, of course, but if somebody all of a sudden refers this particular show to somebody else who's never heard of him, Greenwald's one of the greatest public speakers you would ever encounter.
He's amazing.
Yeah, you go to a program. I saw these kids at these programs that we did over here on the East Coast, and they were just enthralled. Because here's a guy that's getting up and he's speaking from the heart and just so knowledgeable. He's speaking extemporaneously. And then he's followed by Bruce Fein.
Wait, hang on. I got to interrupt you here to talk about the brilliance of Glenn Greenwald for a second. There's a video of Glenn Greenwald debating the drug war at the Cato Institute with a former drug czar, former head of the DEA. And so Glenn gives his talk, and then the other guy gives his talk. And most of the time the C-SPAN cameras are pointed only at the drug warrior doing his talk, but occasionally, they pan out and they show Glenn, his opponent, sitting at the table waiting patiently for his turn, for his rebuttal and that kind of thing. And you can see, there he is, he's just staring off into space, but you can see his eyes moving as he's writing an article, or at least he's like writing down all of his notes for the refutation of the drug warrior when the drug warrior is done. And then when the drug warrior is done, you can see his eyes as he's sitting there reading his own notes that he wrote in his mind. And just as he absolutely flawlessly, without a single or a or anything, point for point for point, just goes through and rebuts and destroys this guy without jotting down a single note on paper. And it's really something to see. Wow, hey, the gear's turning in that guy's mind. I can see him right there, and those are some fancy clockworks.
Oh, it's a sight to behold. I mean, it's a sight to behold. His mind is like a steel trap.
And, the same goes for Bruce Fein. I was so lucky to be your guest at the Restoring the Republic conference there in 2008. And Bruce Fein was supposed to give a 45-minute speech, and he gave a 2-hour and 45-minute speech or something. And the whole thing, he just knows every, at least relevant, founding father quote by heart. All of them. And he can use them at the, snap of a fingers and destroy any argument against the Bill of Rights or any argument for sacrificing liberty. Just unparalleled.
Oh, absolutely. He's one of the most erudite guys, and it's really funny watching the looks on the people in the audiences at our tour because, Greenwald's a younger guy, I don't know, 40-ish or so, and he would mesmerize the students, and many of the students were there because of Greenwald. I mean, Forbes magazine mentioned that he was one of the top most influential liberals in the country. So he's followed by a conservative, and Fein sort of kind of ambles up there. He's a lot older than Greenwald, and you can just tell the kids they're thinking, oh gosh, this Greenwald's talk will be followed by this boring guy, and Fein starts out kind of slow and starts building up steam, and all of it he's quoting Cicero and the founding fathers, and he's getting into this whole crescendo, and all of a sudden the kids their eyes are like huge because here's a guy that is as eloquent and passionate, if not more so, than Greenwald. So it's like a great wrap up to the series, and then to the event. Then we have a big Q&A session where kids get to, or everybody in the audience get to talk as much as they want, ask as many questions as they want. And then we have a social hour where the speakers interact with the students, and it's just a great program. Because a lot of these kids, Scott, think about it. They're 18, 19, 20 years old. They effectively grew up in these formative teen years under the cloud of the post 9/11 environment.
Right. Well, and think too, it's so easy for them to have the reaction that, well, whatever it is, I'm not a Republican. After living through the Bush years especially, that whatever it is, I'm the opposite of that. And then here's Jacob Hornberger saying, oh, you don't have to be a lefty. You could be the opposite of a Republican. You could be a libertarian. And I think this is a big part of why the Ron Paul revolution was such a big hit too, is because there are a lot of people who did not want to identify with the Cheneys and Ashcrofts of the world, and they didn't want to identify with Michael Moore either. And so, basically Ron Paul, Jacob Hornberger, the libertarian movement amounts to an out. You don't have to be stuck in this trap anymore. Here.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I round out this panel by bringing the libertarian perspective on this, and it's interesting because we all three share the same perspectives, but Glenn Greenwald comes at it from a liberal perspective. Fein comes at it from a conservative perspective. I come at it with a libertarian perspective. So, these kids, regardless of where they stand ideologically, can see that this is important to whatever you call yourself. And so it's just a fantastic program. Thank you very much for letting your listeners know about it.
Yeah, we'll talk again about the dates and the places, especially the upcoming events here.
Okay, it starts a week from Monday. on the 15th, and so people can start live streaming it somewhere around 6:30, 7:30. Just check our email update on fff.org for each event. And each event's going to be live streamed, and then each event's going to be archived, a few days afterward. But if people are in the area, in Seattle, Davis, California, near Sacramento area, San Francisco, San Diego, Tucson, Boulder, Denver area, come out and see us, especially if they're supporters of ours. We'd love to have them interacting with the donors. But, with the students, if our donors in this area, we'd love for them to come because, a lot of these kids haven't yet been exposed to libertarianism, and it'd be great to have some of the libertarians coming on out to the event, and hobnobbing with the students, exposing them to libertarian ideas, especially in an economic sense, because we're not going to get into economics at this, but it would be nice if libertarians were there kind of just, nonchalantly talking about libertarianism to these kids. So,
well, it's something that's so important to me is really just reaching out to the left in general. Because I think, especially you go all the way to the left, what do they say? They say they want the state to wither away. So I say, all right, let's wither that thing away. No need to stop at a dictatorship first. We'll just go ahead and wither that sumbitch, and try to get them on board. But here's the thing. A liberal, or someone who's just kind of a de facto left type, it's ingrained in them. It's the knee-jerk reaction that a libertarian is ultimately just a front man for corporate America and wants them to be free to do whatever they want and screw everybody else, which means, in a sense, that, Jacob, you're to the right of Dick Cheney, who even Dick Cheney says we need this regulatory state to make everything fair and all this crap, right? So then what's mind-blowing and life-changing to them is when they understand that that is actually not true, that the future freedom foundations of the world can be all for markets and yet carry no favor whatsoever for any particular businessman who may be guilty of fraud, that kind of thing, or may be guilty of getting away with murder this way or that other way. And I think, we all learn in school, especially, in public school, junior high and high school kind of classes, the capitalists will get away with anything unless the government stops them. So we use our democracy to regulate them capitalists so that they don't ruin everything, whatever. So when they find out that you actually are not representing those evil capitalists, you're actually just debunking that lie and pointing out how usually those very same people are using the state against the rest of us, that kind of thing. You can really change somebody's life in the course of one conversation. I've seen it happen many times. And you're a great example of how it's done, too, because nobody thinks that you're a shill for anything once they hear you talk.
Well, thank you for saying that. You just never know the power of ideas. You share the ideas with a group of people or just one person, and you just never know what's going to happen. It happened to me, I was a liberal, and I discovered libertarianism, and all the scales fell from my eyes, and I realized, my gosh, I've been lied to all my life. I was lied to in public schools about America having a free enterprise system and America a free country, and I realized that all this socialism that had been foisted upon our land was destroying America. It was hurting poor people. I was concerned about the poor, and now I understood that here was a system that was hurting poor people, not to mention the whole war on immigrants, of course, that liberals and conservatives love to wage against the poor. So to me, libertarianism is the only way out of this morass, both domestically and foreign policy, that the statists have imposed on us. You look at a big presidential debate, so-called big presidential debate the other night, where it's just two statists battling over which statist reform is going to be adopted to try to save the horrors of the statist system. The real debate should be between libertarianism and statism.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. All right, well, and speaking of which, and especially where it applies to foreign policy, I want to point people to this article, because I know you have to go soon. It's Squeezing the Iranian Citizenry. You can find it at fff.org/blog. Squeezing the Iranian Citizenry. What's wrong with that anyway?
Well, it's just really part of the horrors of this empire we have in the foreign interventionism, the quest of the U.S. government to to force other countries to bend to its will, to do what the empire tells people to do. And it's a war against the citizens of a country. I mean, the government always says, no, this is focused on the leaders. We're trying to hurt the leaders. Well, they're not trying to hurt only the leaders. They're trying to hurt the citizens too, because they're trying to get the citizens to overthrow the regime. So the citizens are the means, and to the end, which is regime change. And we saw this in Iraq, where the sanctions were killing hundreds of thousands of Iraqi children. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Madeleine Albright, told 60 Minutes that the deaths of 500,000 Iraqi children were worth it. I mean, imagine that, killing children and saying it's worth it. I mean, it's just horrible. And we've got this embargo against Cuba for 50 years or so because the CIA still is hoping to oust Fidel Castro from power and install a pro-U.S. dictator, along with the Pentagon. And now they're doing it to the Iranian people. The value of the Iranian currency, I just saw just in a week, dropped 40%. People are now struggling the same way that the Iraqi people were struggling. Their life savings are being depleted. There's been plane crashes in Iran because they can't get the parts to repair the planes because of the sanctions. I mean, this is just immorality, Scott, to the nth degree. It is amazing to me that a country like the United States of America is doing this to people. It's just horrible, and it's important that we libertarians continue battling to end this type of horrific nonsense.
Yeah, that's what I think too. By the way, here's that clip of Madeleine Albright.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And is the price worth it? I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
Symbolically, saying that is almost as bad as killing 500,000 kids, right? I mean, if you're an Arab and you hear Madeleine Albright say that, I mean, if it's me, strap a bomb to my chest. It's on. Killing 500,000 kids.
Oh, and then saying that it's worth it. I mean, what could ever possibly be worth killing so many children? It's just absolutely horrendous.
And here's the thing, too, is even if you accept their premise, it's, as far as their ends, it makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, here's the crew. Well, it wasn't them. It was the Bush Sr. crew, but still, same difference. The American government told the Shiites and the Kurds, rise up and overthrow Saddam. We'll back you up. And then, like the Bay of Pigs, just left them high and dry to be slaughtered by more than 100,000 all at once in that one. And then you put a blockade on them and starve them all to death, and then the starving is supposed to make them so angry that they somehow use their empty stomach to overthrow Saddam Hussein. Now that they have even less power than they had before, it was a mathematical impossibility they were ever going to be able to overthrow him in that way. If they couldn't overthrow him right after the war, they sure as hell couldn't overthrow him in 1996 for us.
Well, right, and you were absolutely right in pointing that out, that they were encouraging the Iraqi people to rise up, and when they did, they just stood by while Saddam Hussein's helicopter gunships just massacred them. I mean, it's just absolutely horrendous. And here's another factor here. The anger, the tremendous anger at losing your life savings, at losing your children or your spouse or whatever to malnutrition or infection because they can't get the medicines and so forth, then all of a sudden that anger, that rage manifests itself with terrorist counterattacks. And what does the U.S. say? Oh, no, they just hate us for our freedom and values, like they said in 1993 when they attacked the World Trade Center, 9/11, the USS Cole, the same old stuff. They cannot acknowledge that their own policies, sanctions, invasions, occupations, assassinations, drones, and so forth, that's the root of the anger and hatred, because if they acknowledge that, the American people are going to say, hey, wait a minute, this is not what America's all about. This is not what we want our country to be doing. Yeah. And unfortunately, that's what our country is doing. It's contributing to the misery and suffering now of the Iranian people.
Yeah, it's funny, Fitzy G in the chat room is pointing out that Hussein was still in power at the time. So how was it worth it at all, even in the construction of the rhetoric there? Like, what was worth it? That someday it's going to work, you're sure, or what? And then, of course, it wasn't. They ended up having to invade the place in 2003 to get that regime change they wanted so bad. So really,
That's right.
They could have not had a blockade at all and just waited till 2003 and then had their regime change, and they could have saved 1 million lives.
Yeah, see, but it's this
And then killed another million.
It's this perpetual hope that the sanctions are going to force people to overthrow the regime. I mean, they had somewhat of a success story, I put it in quotation marks, in Chile in '73, where they made in Nixon's terms, made the economy scream so that people would overthrow the Allende regime. Well, the military has a coup there, which is fully supported and participated in by the CIA. The Pentagon's in there supporting them. And Pinochet uses this economic emergency to assume the same powers that the Bush administration assumed after 9/11 and exercise those powers, rounds up tens of thousands of people, executes many of them, including 2 Americans that the CIA helped execute, and tortured people, raped people, and so forth. So that's and the CIA and the military loved it because you see they were killing terrorists and communists and so forth. And I think that's what they're hoping for in Iran, is like a military takeover that's pro-U.S. like the Shah of Iran's regime, or some dictator that's in there like the Shah. I mean, that's all they're interested in, is getting a pro-U.S. ruler in there who will be submissive, like another Hosni Mubarak. That's what they're hoping for in Iran. Yeah. And that's what they were hoping for with Iraq.
Well, the problem is they got away with it in Iran once before, and so they think they can again. I mean, I don't see how they really could. I think even if all the mullahs fall and the military takes over, why are they going to be our allies any more than the mullahs were? That doesn't really ring true to me that it's even possible any more than Madeleine Albright's policy was ever going to work. But and I know you got to go, but just real quick to bring it back to, present day and the circumstances with Iran. I talked with Mohammed Sahimi, who's written about the effect of the sanctions in Iran, and he talked about how, he confirmed himself. He was reporting himself. He had relatives, 2 different brothers-in-law, I think he said, who are pharmacists in Tehran, who said that they can't get their chemotherapy meds for the cancer patients. And they can't get another example was the medicine for hemophiliacs to help their blood clot, which of course means that then they not only can just bleed to death with a scrape or whatever, but also it means that they can't get surgeries and other care that they need and whatever, and they're dying. Innocent people are dying right now, and when, as you mentioned, the currency is breaking in Iran right now, that the sanctions are working, the crippling sanctions are working and breaking the currency, that there's no way to measure the depths of despair that is going to cause. How many different Iranian businesses are going under? How many families destroyed? How many kids beaten to death in the dad's fit of drunken rage or whatever the hell it is when you destroy an economy? It's a war that we are perpetrating on the people of that society, all of them.
You're right. It's a real war. And you're right. The misery is unbelievable that they're inflicting on these people. And the anger and rage that must be rising among those people is just immeasurable.
Yeah,
and we're going to pay a price for it. I have no doubts we're going to pay a price for it.
Somehow I think Americans, they just don't see it. Like they hear, crippling sanctions or whatever. They just can't imagine that Iran is not a shape on a map. It's a real place with real innocent civilians who, just like us, they're just trying to live their lives and get by in the world. And this is what we're doing to them for these bogus reasons.
And many of them love America. I mean, I know Iranian Americans and so forth. They're a wonderful people, and they have generally respect and love for America. But boy, you do something like this to people, and you cost them their life savings and the lives of their spouses and their children, their loved ones, and their fellow countrymen, and all of a sudden all bets are off. And this is what this government's doing, our government. It's just creating more animosity, more anger, more hatred. And when that manifests itself in another terrorist attack, then they take away our freedoms and they start taxing us more. It's the biggest scam in town. It's a federal scam. It's coming from Washington, D.C.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for everything, Jacob.
Hey, thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.
Everybody, that is the great Jacob Hornberger. He is the founder and president of the Future of Freedom Foundation at FFF.org, and especially check out his blog there. It's not really a blog, it's just article after article. full-sized articles there. fff.org/blog. And we'll be right back here in a few.
So you're a libertarian, and you don't believe the propaganda about government awesomeness you were subjected to in 4th grade. You want real history and economics. Well, learn in your car from professors you can trust with Tom Woods' Liberty Classroom. And if you join through the Liberty Classroom link at scotthorton.org, we'll make a donation to support the Scott Horton Show. Liberty Classroom, the history and economics they didn't teach you.
In an empire where Congress knows nothing, the ubiquitous D.C. think tank is all. And the Israel lobby and their neocon allies must own a dozen. Well, Americans have a lobby in Washington, too. It's called the Council for the National Interest at councilforthenationalinterest.org. They advocate for us on Capitol Hill. Join CNI to demand an end to the U.S.-sponsored occupation of the Palestinians and an end to our government's destructive empire in the Middle East. That's the Council for the National Interest at councilforthenationalinterest.org. Hey everybody, Scott Horton here for LibertyStickers.com. If you're like me, then you're right all the time, surrounded by people in desperate need of correction. Well, we can't all have a radio show, but we can all get anti-government propaganda to stick on the back of our trucks. Check out LibertyStickers.com. Categories include anti-war, empire, police state, libertarian, Ron Paul, gun rights, founders quotes, and of course the stupid election. That's LibertyStickers.com. Everyone else's stickers suck. Hey y'all, Scott Horton here. After the show, you should check out one of my sponsors, WallStreetWindow.com. It's a financial blog written by Mike Swanson, a former hedge fund manager who's investing in commodities, mining stocks, and European markets. Mike's site, WallStreetWindow.com, is unique in that he shows people what he's really investing in, updating you when he buys or sells in his main account. Mike's betting his positions are going to go up due to the Federal Reserve printing all that money to finance the deficit. See what happens at WallStreetWindow.com. And if you'd like to sponsor the show too, let me know at Scott@ScottHorton.org. Hey ladies, Scott Horton here. If you would like truly youthful, healthy, and healthy-looking skin, there is one very special company you need to visit, Dagny & Lane at DagnyandLane.com. Dagny & Lane has revolutionized the industry with a full line of products made from organic and all-natural ingredients that penetrate deeply with nutrient-rich ionic minerals and antioxidants for healthy and beautiful skin. That's Dagny & Lane at DagnyandLane.com. And for a limited time, add promo code SCOTT15 at checkout for a 15% discount. Hey y'all, Scott here. As you know, I've been laid off from antiwar.com, and I've embarked on a mission to make this show into a real business. And as you can tell, I've been doing all right at lining up some sponsors, and some great ones at that. But it isn't enough, so the perpetual fund drive rolls on. The Scott Horton Show needs donors and more advertisers if the show is to outlast my meager savings. So please, stop by scotthorton.org/donate. You can make single donations or sign up for a monthly subscription with PayPal. You don't need an account with them to do so. Or use Google Wallet, WePay.com, Give.org, and now even accepting Bitcoins. And if you own or represent a company or organization interested in sponsoring the show, please email Scott@ScottHorton.org so we can work it out. That's scotthorton.org/donate. And thanks.